Hello and welcome. In this episode, we'll be discussing the leadership concept and the vision of the Chief of Defence Staff of the Armed Forces of Nigeria. Effective leadership in the military is essential to ensuring the success of defence operations and safeguarding national security. Today, we'll explore the leadership approach of the Chief of Defence Staff and how his vision aims to shape the armed forces for future challenges. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with others who may find it valuable. Your support will help us grow this platform and foster insightful conversations about leadership and national security. Now, let's dive right in.
All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going deep on something pretty interesting. The vision statement of Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff. And it's more than just, typical military jargon. It's a fascinating look at how Nigeria's top military leader sees the world, the country's place in it, and how they plan to tackle all those security challenges they're facing.
It really is. And what I found striking is it's not all just about strategy and tactics. You actually get a sense of their leadership philosophy. It's almost like you're peeking into how they think about these huge responsibilities.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So one thing that jumps out right away is the emphasis on geography.
Yeah.
How the physical landscape, actually shapes a country's security concerns.
Absolutely. In fact, there's even a quote from Napoleon. He said, "If you know a country's geography, you can understand and predict its foreign policy."
Wow. Never thought of it quite like that. So how does that play out specifically in Nigeria?
Well, you've got to consider the scale. Nigeria is massive, right?
Yeah.
And the terrain, incredibly diverse. You've got deserts, savannas, rainforests, coastal plains. It's got it all.
So many different environments to think about.
Exactly. And then you add in those vast borders, a huge and growing population, and its location, right at the crossroads of all these regional dynamics. It's a lot. Makes it super vulnerable to a whole bunch of different threats.
That's a big challenge. And speaking of threats, the document digs into both internal and external ones.
It does. Internally, of course, you've got the fight against terrorism and insurgency, Boko Haram, ISWAP. Those are the big names.
Right. Those are the ones we always hear about.
But then you've also got things that are more localized. Banditry, those farmer-herder conflicts that keep flaring up. And then the resource-related crime. Oil bunkering, illegal mining. Stuff that feeds off instability.
It's kind of overwhelming when you lay it all out like that. It makes you wonder how anyone could even start to handle all of this.
Yeah, it's a lot to deal with. But the document actually does a good job of laying out the framework for how they approach security in Nigeria. It all starts with the Constitution, of course. Defines the military's purpose.
Sets the ground rules.
Right. Then you've got the National Security Strategy from back in 2019, which really emphasizes this human security approach.
Human security. What does that actually mean?
It's basically putting people first. The idea is that you're not just protecting territory, you're protecting the people who live there. Makes security about well-being.
Makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about military force. It's about recognizing people are at the center of it all.
Exactly. And then there's the National Defense Policy from 2017. This one pushes for total defense. So security isn't just the military's job. It needs everyone. Whole of government, whole of society effort.
Everyone's got to be involved.
Right. It takes collaboration, bringing all these different parts of the government together, civil society, even ordinary citizens, all working towards the same goal.
That's interesting. So how does all this theory, all this high-level stuff, actually translate into military action on the ground?
Well, that's where the National Military Strategy comes in. This is also from 2022. It's the bridge between those policies we were just talking about and the actual, boots on the ground. It gives them the plan to go after those threats.
So lots of moving parts then. And from what I've heard, the Chief of Defense Staff doesn't try to downplay the challenges.
Not at all. In fact, the document's surprisingly upfront about it, acknowledges what it calls huge capability gaps, things that are holding the military back, even points to where things need to improve.
Huh. Pretty rare to see that kind of honesty, isn't it?
I know, right? It's refreshing. And it makes the vision they lay out all the more believable. It's grounded in reality, not just, some pie-in-the-sky thinking.
Okay, so let's get into that vision. What exactly does the Chief of Defense Staff want to see happen with the Nigerian military?
Well, first, it helps to understand the structure of the military itself. You've got the Army, which is organized into 8 combat divisions, plus all those specialized units like the Special Forces Command.
Got it. What about the Navy?
3 operational commands. Each one handles different maritime zones. And then there's the Air Force with 6 commands, everything from tactical air support to logistics and training.
Okay, so a lot of different pieces in play. And even though these details might seem a bit dry, they actually paint a picture, don't they? You can see how big and complex this military force is, all those responsibilities. And often they're working with limited resources.
Right, you're getting a sense of the scale of the operation and the kind of challenges they're up against.
So how does all of this, translate into action on the ground? What are they actually doing out there?
Well, this is where the document gets really interesting. It gives us a look at the specific operations they're running all across the country. It's like a window into what they're up against day in and day out.
All right, give us the inside scoop. Let's hear about some of these operations.
Okay, so one of the major ones is Operation Delta Safe. This one's all about cracking down on that oil bunkering in the Niger Delta and all that other criminal activity that goes along with it.
Sounds intense.
It is. They're doing everything from patrolling the waterways to raiding those illegal refineries, arresting the people involved, trying to shut down that whole illicit trade.
What about Boko Haram? What's being done about them?
That's Operation Hedin-Kai. Massive operation going on in the Northeast. We're talking thousands of patrols, ambushes, offensive operations. Just constant action shows you how serious that fight still is.
Wow. You really get a sense of, the dedication and the danger involved. These aren't just abstract policies, are they? It's people putting their lives on the line every day.
Right, very real. And it's not just about force either. The Chief of Defense Staff really emphasizes a more holistic approach, recognizes that military might alone can't solve everything.
So what's an example of that?
Well, take Operation Safe Corridor. This is a really interesting one. It's focused on de-radicalizing and reintegrating former insurgents.
Wait, so instead of just fighting them, they're trying to bring them back into society?
Yeah, that's the idea. Recognizing that some of these people might have joined these groups out of, desperation or just lack of opportunity.
That's a pretty different way of thinking about things.
It is. It's recognizing that bullets can't kill an ideology. You got to offer something else, a real alternative. And that kind of leads into the bigger picture of the Chief of Defense Staff's vision for the Nigerian military. It's not just about the operations, it's a change in how they think, how they approach things.
I like that. So where do we see that, this new mindset?
Well, it's all through the document, but those 3 pillars of their leadership philosophy really sum it up.
Right. We touched on them earlier. People-centric, prioritizing troop welfare, deepening jointness.
Exactly. Those are the big ones.
So let's break those down a bit more, starting with people-centric. What does that even mean when we're talking about military operations?
It's a pretty powerful idea. Basically, every action the military takes, the well-being of the people has to be at the heart of it.
So you're saying they're not just focused on winning battles?
It's bigger than that. It's about protecting the people, not just the territory. Recognizing that they're not just collateral damage in a conflict.
That's a big shift, isn't it? For a military to think that way.
It is, and they don't just say it. They actually lay out steps for how to put it into practice.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Protecting civilians, making sure human rights are respected, and making sure that any action the military takes is, justified.
So they're being held accountable.
Right. Always operating with the people's best interests in mind.
That makes sense. Makes you think about, how it's actually playing out now. This is 2022, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see a follow-up. How are these principles making a difference?
Yeah. Some kind of assessment. See how it's working in the real world.
Mm.
Okay, so what about that second pillar? Prioritizing troop welfare.
Oh, the Chief of Defense Staff is really serious about this one. Makes sense though, right?
Yeah, I mean, these are the people on the front lines.
Exactly. And if they're not motivated, if they don't have what they need, the military just can't function. Simple as that.
What are they doing to make sure they're taken care of?
Well, they talk about decent living conditions, medical care, making sure they have modern equipment, the stuff they need to do their jobs, but also professional development, giving them opportunities to grow.
So it's not just the basics, it's investing in them, seeing them as, individuals.
Absolutely, investing in their well-being. And in the long run, that makes the entire military stronger, more resilient.
I get it. Okay, so let's talk about that third pillar, deepening jointness. Now this one, I got to be honest, sounds a bit more technical. What's that all about?
All right, so this is where it gets really interesting. It's a pretty big shift in how they want the military to work.
Okay, I'm listening. What kind of shift?
Think about the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. Traditionally, they've kind of operated in their own lanes.
Yeah, separate branches.
Right. But what the Chief of Defense Staff is pushing for is true jointness, working together seamlessly.
So breaking down those barriers.
Exactly, no more silos. In today's world, a joint approach, where everyone's working together, sharing information, it's just way more effective.
Makes sense. Combining their strengths, coordinating their efforts.
It's about maximizing their power, making the whole greater than the sum of its parts.
I like it. So it's not just about the different branches working together. Who else are they looking to bring in?
Well, they talk about working with all the other security agencies, police, intelligence services, border patrol. Everyone's got to be on the same page.
So creating a more unified approach to security.
Right. It takes everyone. No single organization can do it all. And, they even talk about international cooperation.
Wow, they really are going big picture.
They are. Nigeria, they say, has a big role to play in regional security. They need to be working with their neighbors to tackle these shared threats, like terrorism, cross-border crime, all that stuff.
Makes sense. Especially since a lot of those problems, they don't stop at a border, do they?
Nope. Terrorism, smuggling, human trafficking, it's all connected.
So working together just makes sense.
Right. Pooling resources, sharing intelligence, coming up with better strategies.
Yeah, it's recognizing that in today's world, security is a global issue.
You can't just go it alone.
So those are the three pillars, right? People-centric, troop welfare, jointness. And what I'm getting from this is these aren't just words, they're actually changing how the military works.
You got it. And at the end of the day, that means more safety and security for the people of Nigeria.
Exactly. But we've been saying all along, it's not just about the military, is it? The Chief of Defense Staff is clear about that. Security is everyone's responsibility.
It's a team effort. And that brings us to the big question for you, the listener. What are your thoughts on the challenges facing Nigeria? What role do you think you can play in making the country more secure?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It makes me think back to, how the Chief of Defense Staff didn't shy away from the tough stuff. Remember how they talked about those huge capability gaps and all those threats they're dealing with?
It's true. You don't see that kind of honesty very often. They're not pretending everything's perfect.
Right. And that makes their vision for the future even more, powerful. Because it's realistic. They're not sugarcoating anything.
It's grounded. It's coming from a place of, actually understanding what they're up against, not just some fantasy.
It's exactly. And they're saying, look, this is going to be a long road. It's going to take real effort. But it's about building a stronger Nigeria, a tougher Nigeria. And that's where, like you were saying, everyone has to be involved.
Yeah, the Chief of Defense Staff is basically saying, we can't do this alone. We need everyone.
So it's a shared responsibility, right? The military can't just do it all. Everyone has to play their part.
It's a call to action. It's like they're saying, hey, step up, help shape your own future.
Really powerful stuff. And, thinking back, this vision statement was from a few years ago, right? 2022.
Yeah, it was.
It makes you wonder, are we seeing progress? Are things moving in that direction towards a military that's more people-focused, more collaborative, more effective? Are people rising to the challenge?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it reminds us that security isn't, some finish line you cross. It's a journey. You're constantly evolving, adapting. Everyone's got to keep pushing forward.
So much to think about. As we wrap this up, this deep dive into the Chief of Defense Staff's vision, I just want to leave everyone with one last thought.
Right.
We've looked at the roadmap, we've seen the challenges, but at the end of the day, the future of Nigeria, it rests on the shoulders of every Nigerian.
Or are you going to sit back and watch? Or are you going to get involved and help shape things? That's a choice we all have to make.
So much to think about. Really appreciate you joining us for this deep dive. Hopefully it's giving you a new way of looking at things, maybe spark some ideas. This is an important conversation, and we all need to be a part of it.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching. If you found this discussion on the leadership concept and vision of the Chief of Defense Staff insightful, please subscribe to the channel for more engaging content. Don't forget to like this video and share it so others can benefit from these insights. We value your input. Head to the comments section and tell us what topics or books you'd like us to cover next. Your engagement helps shape this platform, and we look forward to continuing this conversation with you in future episodes.